At Holborn Assets, we know that trust is the foundation of any financial partnership. For over 25 years, we have been more than a financial services company. We have been a trusted partner to over 20,000 clients with 26 offices across 18 countries. Our dedication to our clients has earned us a 5-star rating on Trustpilot with over 2,000 glowing reviews. As a fully regulated, multi-award winning company, we are trusted with managing over $2 billion in assets. Our team of fully qualified advisors is committed to providing you with personalized, market-leading financial solutions. Choose Holborn Assets, your trusted partner in wealth management and financial advice. Visit our website or call us today to start your journey towards financial success.
Okay, let's get started again. So, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to wherever you may be joining us today. I'm letting people in, so please do excuse me as we go. Right. To today's webinar, alternatives to sending money home. Now, living abroad, people very often ask me the following questions. Where do I set up my savings and investments? It's something that so many people often wonder about and obviously have no idea where to even get started. It's things such as, do I set something up back home or do I keep my money abroad? Which is actually going to be better for me, or what's going to get me the most value at the end of the day? Are there other or better options available to me living abroad now that I'm outside of South Africa? What currency? Do I save my money in dollars, pounds, euros, renminbi or yuan, RMB, Japanese yen? Or do I invest in more than one currency just to be safe? How does currency even affect it? Are there tax implications? So, what are the tax implications, if any? And then also, what happens if I die, which for some of the reasons is becoming a more common concern lately, in terms of if something does happen to you, how does my family back home actually get access to that sort of money, and how long will it take? What are the implications involved there? So these are some of the reasons that I've put this webinar together. Before we get started, though, let me give you a bit of background information about Holborn, the company I work for, and then obviously myself, and then let's take it from there. Right. So me, Matthew Taron, I am a offshore wealth manager. I'm a tax and investment expert. I have lived abroad in numerous different jurisdictions across the years. I specialize in helping high net worth individuals actually take their money out of South Africa and invest and protect it for generations. But I also dedicate quite a bit of my time to helping fellow expats, particularly South Africans living abroad in Asia, to understand the implications of wealth and savings and how to protect that savings and also what to do with it. Why? Well, I know from the time when I was living in China and in Korea, for example, getting advice on that end of the spectrum is so difficult, often not in English. You don't know what to do, you don't know who to turn to. Inevitably, most end up turning to a private banker or a financial advisor back home. And yeah, the advice you get won't be from an expat's point of view. It won't be based on your jurisdiction where you live. It won't be based on the difference of the fact that you're not earning rands, you're earning a foreign currency, your taxes are different. So there's a very big gap or knowledge gap, a lack of information when it comes to advising expats, which your local advisor does not have. So that's why I dedicate a lot of my time, because when I lived there, I couldn't get the sort of advice I needed because I didn't know the right companies at that stage of who to speak to. Right, so I am internationally qualified, as you would expect someone giving advice on the international front to be. I have passed both my level 3 and level 4 chartered exams in the UK. I have my RE5 in South Africa, which is the regular exam required to be able to give advice from South Africa. I also have a national diploma in financial management, 2 tertiary qualifications, specifically in tax and tax law. an advanced level specialized qualification in financial planning, as well as estate planning and South African advanced tax instruments or investment instruments. The company I work for, Holborn, well, we started off just over a quarter century ago in the late 90s with the expansion of the UAE, in actual fact, advising many of your expats. And how that came about was actually with your local South African company. When they, Old Mutual, wanted to go internationally and wanted to move across borders, they wanted to expand, and it meant listing in London on the London Stock Exchange. Investors at the time, though, weren't very happy with this small Arab Emirate holding that they had at the time. So it was then that Old Mutual sold off that Middle Eastern investment arm to the then management team, Bob Parker, he and his team. He then purchased it, rebranded to Holborn, and they went their separate ways with, Old Mutual, as we know, went on to list. Holborn on our side, we've grown quite considerably since then, to the point that we are now the second largest independent wealth advisory globally, with several $billions in terms of assets under advisement. We have licenses and offices in over 18 different jurisdictions spanning the globe, with clients, managing the wealth of clients of over 30,000. What puts us apart from many others, or most others, is the fact that we base our success and that rapid expansion on what we call our 5 pillars. The first one being that size, the fact that we are the second largest independent wealth advisory globally, with several $billions in terms of assets under advisement. And with that, we're offered preferential service, and we get very unique access to discounts and to different service providers, which your average retail large company back home doesn't get access to, which obviously greatly benefits our clients. There is that fact that we are truly independent, so we are not owned, nor are we incentivized by any one fund or product provider. We charge homogeneously across the board, meaning we're able to choose who we work with based purely on merit to our clients with great impartiality. Well, I like to tell clients in first meetings, I remember when I moved back to South Africa and went straight back to doing investments with Sanlam. Let's face it, you and I, we both know it doesn't matter what conversation we have today, I'm going to give you a Sanlam product. Likewise, if I sat here today with an Alan Gray or Investec badge on, what are the chances that suddenly the best solution is an Alan Gray or Investec product? Another reason, another pillar of our success is that service, the fact that we pride ourselves in making sure that we put clients first and that we're in front of our clients at least once a quarter, making sure every 3 months that they're being kept up to date in terms of market conditions, changes in legislation, any new funds or products within the financial world. And this is one of the reasons why, as you can see above that, we win numerous awards internationally every year when it comes to those services. Another one is education, the fact that we are the best qualified globally. All our wealth managers and advisors are required to be internationally qualified. Like I said earlier, I myself, through the Chartered Institute for Securities and Investments in the UK, which is the industry leader when it comes to financial education, as well as then obviously having the regular exams from the regulators where we are actually based. And then finally, that safety and security. The fact that we take client safety very, very seriously. You've worked very hard for your money. You want to be able to grow it and protect it. We diversify into at least 8 different fund managers, and we only structure assets where we know the governments can back the investments. So we'll often look at jurisdictions such as Guernsey, Jersey, Gibraltar, the Isle of Man, Malta, all places with strong ties and links to the UK. So we'll only structure those portfolios and investments where we know the governments can actually put a guarantee on your capital. So that safety and security is of utmost importance to us. Right, so now that we've got that out of the way, let's get down to the nitty-gritty of today, and that is, first of all, if we're going to know where do we save, back home, or do we look for an alternative abroad, let's start off by understanding, well, why do people save? I always tell them there are 2 types of people I come across. Those who I think of wealth as a journey. Those who know where they're going, but just don't know how to get there, what mode of transport. But the other side of the coin, were those who have no idea where they're going, but they're putting money into this left, right, and center, and they've got their fingers in all sorts of pots, and neither one of them is actually going to get them to where they need to be. So let's look at, if you're going to figure out where you're going, what is the reason you're going there? So in terms of investment savings, why do people save? Well, you have those short-term savings. You know, your people who need an emergency fund. If you break your arm, you have enough money to cover you for a month or 2 or 3 months. If you mom, dad gets sick back home and you need to fly back, you need money to be able to cover you. And so you have that emergency funds that one needs to build up. You get those who want to finance future studies. You know, they want to take a year off and go and do their masters or go and do a doctorate or PGCE, which is a common thing. Those who simply just want to be able to fund their travels for next year or the year after. Those who, I don't know why this year seems to be the year of weddings, those who want to be able to save for a wedding. Then you get your more medium to longer term goals. Those who, you know, they've got, you know, a decent job, they're earning a good income, and now they're worried about the fact that living in Asia, they don't have a retirement fund or pension fund. And they don't want to be working there for the rest of their lives and come back with nothing. There's some scary stories I can tell you about that. So there's that fire, you know, that financial independence, being able to retire early, come back, be able to have enough funds to look after yourself, set up a business, you know, be able to create something meaningful, not come back and still live month to month, you know, not have to worry about that sort of money. Those wanting to build that financial security or that nest egg, something to look after them later on. There are those not wanting to end up at 50 or 60, like I say, with nothing, living month to month, or not returning with nothing to show for it. There are those of us wanting to create and save enough wealth to break that poverty loop, or black taxes, as you know, it's called back home, so that they don't end up at age 50, 60 with their own kids eventually having to look after them because they've spent their life looking after their parents, and so that loop just continues. There are those who want to save towards their children's education, and then there are those who want to eventually one day perhaps build a property portfolio. So these are some of the sort of reasons why people save. And whatever your reason may be, having the right solution, you know, to meet the right goal is extremely important. You know, if you're going to go from Seoul to Cape Town or from Shanghai to Cape Town, a boat will get you there, but it's going to take you very, very long. A car, it will get you there. Again, it's going to take you extremely long. A jet, fine, but do you need a private jet or do you just need a normal Boeing? You know, there are lots of different ways. You could even do it by train. There are lots of different ways of doing it. But which one will get you there when you want to get there, and also being the most cost-effective way of doing it? That's where I come in. Now, so let's start off. If you're going to, you figured out the journey, you know where you want to go, you know what to do, where do you do it? I always say, first things first, trust your gut. Most people, you know, your gut, I think, can be quite accurate. Now, I call it hedging your gut. You know, look at your gut. What does your gut tell you? You know, what are your own personal views on South Africa and its future? Now, on a scale of 1 to 100, I'd say, let's start off and say that right now we're in the middle. We're at 50. Do you see over the next 10, 20, or 30 years, do you see things going down that scale, heading more towards, I would say, a Zimbabwe scenario or a Venezuela scenario? There's so many, Turkish scenario, there's so many different examples out there. But do you see things going down that scale? Do you see the currency continuing to devalue, becoming worth less against other hard currencies? Do you continue to see things being politically unstable, not having a firm majority government in power where power is being shared, or another party may come out and take things away, or are we secure and stable? Land expropriation. We all know that as of last year, land expropriation bill was passed. So where do you see the future in terms of that? Do you see things maybe becoming a little bit sketchy or dangerous towards that? That may very well happen now that there is law in place to be able to do so. Corruption. Do you think things will go away? that we will become a corrupt free society where you can rely on your officials to do the right thing and not line their pockets? Will we get inflation under control? Will we start to become in line with the rest of the world in that Goldilocks, sort of range of 1.5 to sort of 2.5%? Will unemployment finally come down, or do you still see unemployment being a very big issue within the country and a drain on the nation's GDP? Do you see crime to continue going on and violence, or do you think we will actually manage to get that under control, with a stable power supply and water supply in more safely? Do you see us going more that Zimbabwe route? Or do you see us going, I like to call it the Singapore route, where they've managed to turn things around, and in 20 years' time, when you do come back, or 30 years' time, whenever it is, things are rosy, it's greener, we've got a strong global currency, we're politically stable and secure. The government, you can rely on them, you can trust them. They're not going to be imposing any new kind of laws to, take away land. Inflation is low. The currency, like I said, is doing well as a result. Unemployment is a thing of the past. Unemployment is very low. You don't have to worry about being able to get a job when you get back home. You will be able to get a job, and that job will be a decent paying job. The economy, as a result, is stable. Power supplies, water safety, it's stable. And you can feel safe. You don't have to spend extra money on private security, or what do they call it here? Not safeguards, the security companies that you need to be able to call on with an alarm all night. Where do you see things going? That will very, significantly affect the value of your investments as well. An investment in a strong global economy that is politically stable, that is politically secure, that has low inflation, that has a growing economy will do better. So do you see South Africa going up that scale towards that 100? In which case, by all means, keep your money in South Africa. Or do you see South Africa going down towards that Zimbabwe route where things are not rosy, where things have not improved, or things may even be getting worse? If that's the case, well, then don't send your money here. Rather, keep your money somewhere else where you won't have it exposed to that. So start off by hedging your gut. And if you say, it's a 50-50, who knows? I think it might be exactly where it is now. Well, then very simply, you shouldn't decide financial views on the toss of a coin. But if if your gut says it's 50-50, well, then essentially it means you should be putting 50% of your money back home and 50% of your money somewhere else. Because if you are wrong, well, at least half of it is safe. And if you are right, then again, and we're still where we are, at least not all of your money has gone down in value, only half of it. Right. Then, once you've looked at your gut, there are other more important things. If you don't trust your gut alone, let's look at some of the economics and the basic principles when it comes to finance, investment, and wealth. If you're sending your money back to South Africa, you're going to be changing them back into rands, the ZAR, and investing in ZAR. Now, what is the ZAR? What is the rand? To be able to try and make that simpler or easier to understand, let's look at it as the share price of the country, as an example. So what does the share price of a company measure? Well, it helps us to know, is the company any good? Is it a healthy company, or is it a company that's on thin ice? Just as the currency, the ZAR. The currency will tell you a lot about the country, in that, is there a lot of demand for that currency? Is that country doing well, or is that country on skating on thin ice? The desire for its exports. Do people want to buy its services, their goods? Same as the country. The currency tells you, well, does the goods that country and the service that country provides, do people want that or not? It gives you a sentiment on, an understanding of the effectiveness of the management, the board and its CEO. Are there policies? How good are they at managing that company? Same as how good is the government at managing that country? If management is poor or weak, or there are issues within the governance, it will affect the currency, and the currency will start to lose value. So it gives us the very same ideals as what the share price does. Again, that trust in the actual CEO or the president and his board. Can you rely, can you trust him to lead the company or the country in a direction that will, you know, generate growth and that will drive things forwards? Or, is there not a lot of trust there at all? It reflects the expectations of your future returns in terms of a company. How profitable is that country? Will you get good dividends? Will you get good growth? Will the value of the stocks go up? Just like a share price. The currency does exactly the same. A strong currency, we know that people have confidence in it. We expect that it'll do well. There's a lot of demand for it. A weakening currency, there are other issues at play, either in governance or in the services and the goods. But should we really be having our money in that sort of country or in that currency? So let's look at it from that perspective. Now, this is what we call the czar slide, and here we've got the 20-year slide. Now, for those who very recently, yes, the rand did very well against the dollar, with Trump and his antics and tariffs. But now we see the dollar starting to improve again and the rand starting to lose value. Now, there's a reason we call it the foxtrot currency, or the one step forward, two steps back. There are years, make no mistake, where the rand does do well and it does outperform the dollar. The problem is, though, it's just not consistent and it doesn't do that for too long. And if we go back even 20 years, you'll see that whether you're comparing it against the dollar, or whether you're comparing it against the euro, or whether you're comparing it against the Great British Pound, you can see from those arrows, it loses value, it goes down. Now, very simply, if those were three companies, and I asked you, do you want to invest in either of those three companies? Would you invest in them? Just looking at that. But you would invest in rands, which again, that's why. So look at it as the currency, look at it as the share price of a company, and then ask yourself, would you? If not, why are you? So the rand on average loses around 5%. Yes, there are years when it's much higher, and there are years when it does well and it doesn't. But over the medium to longer term, it loses around 5 to sometimes 7% per annum. Now, this is looking at the rand against the dollar over a longer period of time, since 1985 to 2025. I should actually update that to this year. But again, you can see that there are times when it goes up, but it comes back down. It goes up and then it comes back down, just like the foxtrot. Now, that arrow is very clear to see. Now, if we go back to 1985, it was 1 Rand 38 to the dollar. And now it's 17 Rand. It got better. We went down to 16, then down to 15, close to 15 and a half. And now we're back up to 16 Rand 90, heading up to that 17 Rand a dollar territory again. So it just goes to show you that's from that time. Now, for those of you who are not good at maths and not good at reading charts or looking at charts, if looking at that downward arrow is just too complicated to understand, very simply, if it was 1 Rand 38 to the dollar in 1985, and at the end of last year it was 17 Rand, now it's at 16 Rand 90, so very much close. 1 Rand 38 plus 1,176.5% gives you 17 Rand. So this is what I very often like to ask, in meetings when I speak to clients. If I gave you an investment and told you that over the next 30 years, in the next 30 to 40 years, you're only going to lose between 1 to 1,500% of your money, would you invest in it? I've never had a single person say, oh yes, please give me that. Everyone says no. But if you're changing your money to rands, that's what you are doing. So consider that when you send your money back to South Africa and you're going to invest in rands. That's 1,000 over the last 40 years, 1,176%. So we've dealt with currency. We know now if we're going to send it back, don't send it back to somewhere where you're going to be doing it in rands. Keep it somewhere where you can do it in dollars, pounds, euros, something where it's not losing value. The other thing that we need to consider is if you're going to be choosing whether you send money back home or whether you keep it abroad, tax. somehow everyone forgets about tax. Very simply, South Africa is known as a high tax jurisdiction. It's one of the highest tax jurisdictions out there, in line with the UK, Australia, France. It's a high tax jurisdiction. You compare that to somewhere like Asia and Korea and China, for example, where the average tax on a similar income in South Africa is around 30. If you were earning that income back home, it's 31 to 41%. In China, you're paying an average of 20%, so nearly half. In Korea, after your deductions, your average tax should be around 3 to 3.5%. The lowest tax rate in China is around 3%. Now, something that many people forget is that that money that you're earning abroad is exempt, meaning it's free from tax inside South Africa. You still have to tell SARS about it, by the way, you have to tell them, but it's free from tax. So why on earth would you take your salary that you've earned and your savings, send it back to a country, A, into rands, where you know it's going to lose value, and then also where you're going to be paying more tax? Why? It's what people do. Rather look and consider different jurisdictions. If you're going to send it anywhere, what about the Isle of Man or Guernsey, the Bahamas? There are the Middle East. There are many jurisdictions around the globe where you can pay 0% tax. The only way you can send your money back to South Africa and get it to grow free of tax back home is by either putting it into a tax-free savings, which at this point now will allow you to save up to 3,883 Rand it is a month, so 46,000 a year, or into retirement funds. So if you're in Asia, very simply ask yourself that question. Do you send it back to South Africa, where now you're going to end up paying 18 to 45% tax on it? Or do you rather just send it somewhere else where there is no tax? It's as simple as that. Right, so let's dive into that tax a little bit more. Before I do so, I'm going to launch a poll, and that poll helps me to, while we go through this, if you don't mind taking part in that poll, it helps me to figure out more of what I need to cover within the webinars, where I need to concentrate and where I don't need to concentrate. So please do take part in that poll. It does help me. Right, so if we look at that now, let's dive deep into that tax. So in South Africa, we know we are a high tax jurisdiction. Now, if you're building wealth, if you're saving money, there are essentially three things that you can buy. You're either going to put your money into something that earns income, earns interest, coupons from government or corporate bonds, rental income, anything that gives you that consistent, regular growth or return. Or you're going to go and put the money onto the stock market and buy shares and earn dividends, so equities. Or you're going to put your money into something that's capital in nature, different capital funds as an example. Anything that's income in nature, you're going to end up paying tax at up to 45% on. Anything that's equity in nature, so shares, you're going to pay a fixed rate of 20% dividends withholding tax. And anything that's capital in nature, you're going to pay up to 18% capital gains tax. Now let's compare that, as I said earlier, to the Isle of Man or Guernsey, Bahamas, etc. There are many different countries where it's 0% tax. Do you like paying tax, or would you prefer to rather not pay those tax? Now, how do we save that money in South Africa? Because we can save that money without having to pay taxes. We could put it in a retirement fund or into pension funds. The problem with that, though, is that it must, when you take that money out, eventually be taxed as income. So when you reach age 55 or 60 or whenever it is that you retire and you start to take money out, it will be a pension. You are forced to buy an annuity with it. 2/3 of it must be an annuity. And that is then taxed as income, which if you look above is the most expensive form of tax. So why take money that now is free of tax and put it into something where you're making it taxable at the most expensive form of tax? You could also look at doing a tax-free savings account. The problem with the tax-free savings account is that the most you can save in a tax-free saving account is 3,800, and I think it's 83 Rand a month, which is, I think it's about 1,500 RMB, or around, I think it's 250,000 Korean won. let's face it, you're not going to save enough money to be able to retire or to become financially independent or to be able to come and set up your own business. And, very few goals you're going to be able to do with just that. So what are the alternatives then? Well, don't send it back to South Africa. Rather have it somewhere where you can grow it free of tax. Now, digging a little bit deeper into those tax-free savings, there is a reason why any financial advisor, any website, any bank, any calc, it doesn't matter who you speak to, will tell you that whether you're putting your money into a TFSA or TFI, as we call it in South Africa, or whether you're putting your money into an ISA or an IRP in the UK, or whether you're putting it into a TFSA in Canada, or whether you're putting it into an ISA in Australia, it doesn't matter where around the globe you go as well. Tax-free savings are a big thing. Why? Simply because tax-free savings grows faster than taxed savings. Here, looking at an example from 10x, you can clearly see in this example, they said, right, if you're saving 3,000 a month for 13 years and 10 months, eventually you will end up with 2.26 million. Whereas had you done that through regular savings, those ones that are normally taxed, you'd only have 1.7 million. So that's quite a significant difference. If you don't believe 10x, Discovery will tell you the same thing. And in fact, not using a tax-free savings account yet, here's why you need one now. Everyone will go on about the brilliant benefits of tax-free savings because tax-free savings grows faster than regular savings. Here's an example from Sanlam if you don't trust Discovery or 10x. Again, showing you that tax-free savings, that blue line, gives you significantly more money at the end of the day than that green line. Old Mutual telling you the same thing in their example, showing you that growing a lump sum of 30,000 will give you 152 if it doesn't have taxes, but it'll only give you 104 if you are taxed. That said, though, what many people don't see and aren't cognizant of is that tax-free savings, well, good, does come with its limits. And that is that if you save anything more than that prescribed limit, which was 3,000 a month up until the 1st of March this year, now it's 3,883. If you save a cent more than that or a rand more than that 46,000, you will pay a tax penalty of 40% on everything above that limit. Now, again, unless you like paying tax, believe it or not, there are some people who do like paying taxes. Why would you do that? Here again from Alan Gray as to why the tax-free savings may not actually be suitable for you. Again, if you're not cognizant of the fact that you will pay a penalty if you go above from this year onwards 46,000, and that penalty is heavy. It's a 40% tax penalty. And it's not just per tax-free savings. If you've got 5 different tax-free savings, all with 1,000 Rand in each tax-free savings that you're saving every month, you will pay 40% on everything above that 46,000 for the year. So we know now that if you're going to save money, ask your gut, where should you be doing it? Then look at currency. Should you be doing it in rands or should you be doing it something that does not lose value? Should you be doing it in something where you pay tax along the way or where it can grow tax-free? And as we've shown, there are countries around the globe where you can make it grow free of taxes. And they are available to you now that you live outside of South Africa. The other thing that we then have to consider is, well, if we're going to grow our money tax-free, because that's the best way, in either a tax-free savings account or now in a retirement type style function, what are some of the things that limit us? One of the first things is Regulation 28. Now, if you're going to be putting your money into a retirement annuity or pension style vehicle, Regulation 28 is a specific piece of law inside South Africa that limits and dictates what you may and may not actually invest in. Now, when you are young and you want to be growth orientated and you want to be able to get the most out of your savings, get it to grow as quickly as possible because you can afford that risk. You can afford the ups and downs because you don't need access to it right now. Unfortunately, with Regulation 28, it tells you what you can and can't do. First and foremost, it says that, well, irrespective of what your gut says, 55% of it has to be invested inside South Africa. And there, as you can see, I've highlighted it. The reality is then that 55% of your retirement savings, so that tax-free savings within a retirement community, must be invested in South African assets. And there, what comes is the danger of prescribed assets. And even last year alone, in 2025, we again saw the ANC with their policy documents wanting to use pension fund assets to help fund the health insurance scheme that they want to launch inside South Africa, or to be able to help fund some of your state-owned enterprises to save them from collapse. I don't know about you. What do you think that's going to do to your savings if your money goes towards Eskom or SAA or into the health the fund? It also tells you, though, more in-depthly, exactly what you can and cannot invest in. How much has to go or may go into property, how much may go into equity, and which asset classes you may or may not use. So it very much restricts a lot of what you may want to be able to do or can actually do younger on in life. Now, if we give the fact that, and that's that second orange or highlighted line there, if we give the fact that South African shares can be particularly volatile in the short term due to that currency, again, the ZAR fluctuations, as well as ongoing political, and economical issues within the country, having 55% of your money locked into something that is that volatile and that restrictive, is an issue. So again, back home or abroad, we've looked at the currency side, we've looked at the tax side, we've looked at if you're going to do it through tax efficient solutions such as an RA or some kind of retirement style savings, the regulatory restrictions we have on that. So what about all your other savings then, like your tax-free savings, where it's not a retirement fund, so there's no regulation 28? Well, then we have another piece of law from the Collective Investment Schemes Control Act, otherwise known as CISCA, and that is Section 65. And Section 65 actually regulates what may and may not be sold inside South Africa when it comes to investments. Now, if let's say you are a big international investment company, significantly big, you deal with billions and billions of dollars. Then you see the small country at the bottom of Africa. And do you want to make your product available to South Africans? Well, if you are going to, you need to establish an office inside South Africa, or you need to have a representative office inside South Africa, or representative. You also need to be able to pay the government fees, registration fees, as well as annual fees. Now, when you're used to dealing with European wealth and American wealth and Asian wealth, do you really want to expose yourselves to the hassles of a small little country at the bottom of Africa, having to set up an office there and a representative and paying fees? And this is the reason why you'll very often see some of your big international funds are not available inside South Africa on a lot of the platforms. Now, from choice of investment freedom, if we look at South African funds, so the CISCA approved funds, your Collective Investment Control Schemes Act, there are around 630 different approved funds. That includes your local South African and offshore funds. If we compare that to your more than 131,000 different open-ended mutual funds globally, that's 0.4%. You're limiting yourself by investing back home into 0.4% of the globe. The largest FSP or investment company, service provider company inside South Africa, if you go onto their platform, it'll give you access to 260 funds, local and offshore. So not necessarily only within South Africa, you can invest in offshore funds as well through that company, but in total still you only have access to around 260 funds, worth around $22 billion, that particular FSP. Now we compare that to someone like BlackRock. That's 0.2% of the size of BlackRock, or 1.4% of the size of Franklin, or it's only 2.9% of Goldman Sachs. So you really, it's the way I like to, and I've done this in some of the webinars, it's like going to a buffet and then saying, no, I'm only going to allow myself to choose from the bread. Why do that? Why go to South Africa and say, I'm only going to choose from what's available in South Africa and cut out the rest of the globe. Um, does it make a difference though? Is there something to be said? Well, here, when it comes to investment, does size matter? If we look at the majority of the world's global stocks or global shares divided between three specific continents: North America, Asia, and Europe. For the last 16 years straight, North America has been the dominant jurisdiction with the fastest growing returns. Last year, there's been a bit of a change, but I don't see why that's not going to revert back again. So if we look at that, you're looking at that ball that you see in front of you. There we have the United States in terms of that size. Then we have China, Germany, Canada, Japan, India, France, the UK. That tiny, 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 tiny dot over there at the bottom left that no one can make out, that's South Africa. But you're telling me you'd rather invest in that tiny dot or send your savings, concentrate on that tiny dot and forget about the rest. What are you doing when you do that? Well, brands. Everyone understands brands. Google, Toyota, Amazon, Netflix, Apple, So let's look at that. Now, does it matter when we look at the brands and the size of that? Well, if we look at the world's top 500 most valuable brands, so the Fortune 500 list, top five, no surprises there. If we look in terms of that top 500, only two countries in the southern hemisphere have entries: Brazil and Australia. So everything else is in that northern hemisphere, but you still want to send all your money to that very bottom into Africa. There are no entries in Africa, let alone just inside South Africa. If we look from a corporate perspective, in terms of South Africa and that size, the biggest, or in terms of South African companies, the wealthiest in terms of South African companies from the South Africa top 100 versus the Forbes top 100. The top company on the South African top 100 is Anglo Gold with around 2.6 billion. On the Forbes 100, we have Nvidia with 4.3 trillion. Now, in rand terms, that's Anglo Gold, Ashanti at 45 billion versus 73 trillion. Now, for those of you who don't, can't imagine the size of that, there we have the numbers spelled out. Anglo Gold, the biggest, best company in South Africa at present, 45 billion versus Nvidia at the 73 trillion. That makes our number one company in South Africa 1,653 times smaller than the number one company on the Forbes top 100, or 99.9% smaller. Here, just looking at the JSE, so the JSE top 100, so the top 100 companies on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, and we compare that to the top 500 companies in the US. If you invested in the South African top 100 companies for the last 10 years, this is dated from 2014 to 2024. I couldn't get more recent statistics because it was something I was busy trying to do at the same time that it follows through. You'd have grown 70%. JC on the S&P 500, you would have grown 190%. So remember that, I don't know, you call that teal, that color? So let's look then. I thought I'd be interested to show this sort of graph. Now, here, remember that Ashanti, the Anglo Gold, it's the gold color. And there you can see it on the screen. I don't know if you can see my mouse. It's the fourth one down at 80% over a 10-year period, over that last 10-year period, 80%. The green one is Nvidia. So if you'd invested in Nvidia versus invested in Anglo Gold over that same 10-year period, you'd have grown a difference between 80% versus 650%. More so, what are most South Africans going to do? Well, they're not going to go and invest in, Ashanti even. They're going to go and invest in, if they're lucky, the JSE top 100, which is the teal line, which if you can see there is now the second one from the bottom. It's the one that's doing really, really badly. Um, in fact, if we look at it over that same 10-year period, and that's why it's based on that time, because I wanted the top 10 performers. What were the top 10 performers in South Africa? Well, it's the best performing one is going to be the Richemont. There's Prospus, Naspers, as many of you may know it as well. There's Glencore, there's the Ashanti Gold. Now, but what are South Africans going to do? Yeah, you're going to send your money back, and I guarantee you're not even going to invest in those. No, no. What are the top 10 or the top investing? This is why it's back to 2024, because the only insight I could get in terms of what are the top selling equities at the time from Easy Equities was an article back in 2024. I can't find a newer one saying what are people buying right now. No, they weren't investing in Richemont. They weren't buying Prosus. They weren't buying Naspers. They weren't buying any Ashanti Gold. No, they were buying Discovery, Shoprite, Sasol, all the regular ones that your typical South Africans buy. So, not only do most send their money back into rands where they're going to tax it, they don't even invest in great things. They will often go and invest in what everyone else is investing in. So what are the alternatives? Very simply, what else could you do? This is where it is extremely important that you speak to someone who is licensed abroad, who has the accreditations and the experience, the knowledge, the insight, and the qualifications to be able to structure your savings and investments abroad, not back home inside South Africa, somewhere where you can keep your money and invest it in dollars, pounds, euros, Swiss francs, where you are with big, global, well-known, international, very established companies, where you can get it to grow free of tax with access to global funds, and also where your fees are not the South African fee model of paying fees based on the fund value for life, where it's not that, because that is a pretty expensive way. So there's a reason I like to tell everyone, there's a reason why you go into Century City in Cape Town, or you go into Sandton in Johannesburg, the biggest, brightest, shiniest new glass buildings are always your financial companies. Why? Ask yourself that. So, what are the alternatives? Well, if we summarize that, then please don't forget to take part in that poll. I see quite a few people are already doing that. It does help considerably when people do that. There's still a few more that need to go. So please do take part in that poll. So before I summarize then, if you wouldn't mind, you should see a poll that's popped up. Please do take part in that poll. It does help me to fine-tune things for future webinars, as well as knowing the kind of demographic of the people that watch the webinar, so that I can, if more people are couples and less people are singles, to try and add more of that information into future webinars. So please do, if you don't mind, take part in that poll. Right, so let's have a look at that then. In summary, if we put all of that together, should you set your things up back home, or do you keep it abroad? Well, if we look at that tax-free savings inside South Africa through some kind of pension fund where you're able to save more than just 1,500 RMB or 350,000 won, you're not gonna, if you're only saving 1,000 RMB, you're not gonna be able to retire on that. You're not going to become financially independent. You're not going to be able to set up a business one day. Same in South Korea, if you're saving less than 350,000 won, you're not going to be able to do any of those things. So for real meaningful savings where you actually want to build wealth, how do you do that free of tax in South Africa or from where you are? If we compare the local South African options through an RA, which is effectively your only choice, versus an offshore savings, a regular type of savings, in South Africa you'll have that regulation 28 restrictions. Offshore you won't. So there is no fear of prescribed assets where the government can tell you what you can and can't invest in, and what portions may go into what into different sectors. In South Africa, you'd have limited offshore exposure in that 55% of your savings must be invested inside South Africa, whereas outside South Africa, you invest wherever you like. You have that government restricted restriction of funds, that Section 65, whereas abroad, obviously, you don't have those sort of restrictions. You have very limited access before age 55 inside South Africa, and when you do access it using that two-pot system, you're only going to get access up to a third, and it's going to be at a heavy tax penalty. Internationally, very often with your regular savings style investments, well, after year two, you start to gain access. So from year three onwards, you get increasing access, and there are no penalties. The other big difference is that when you do finally start to live off that money, in South Africa, you can only retire at age 55. If you save up enough money, build it successfully, and you want to retire abroad or even back in South Africa with your offshore regular savings, you can do so at the age of 40 if you want, or 45. It doesn't have to be at age 55, or there's no age limit on that. More importantly, you're not forced to take an income, meaning that in South Africa at retirement, you have to take two-thirds as a forced pension, which is taxed as income. And remember from that earlier slides, income is the most expensive form of tax. With international regular savings, there is no forced two-thirds. You can draw down whatever you want, however you want. You're not forced to make it income and pay tax, income tax on that. Your fees in South Africa tend to be a fund-based fee, so you pay a percentage of whatever the value of the investment is, which is fine. If it's only worth 10,000 now, it's not much because it's a percentage of 10,000. But when you have 1 million, 5 million, 10 million, then that percentage starts to become a lot of money. Whereas internationally, very often with your regular savings type products, your fees are based on initial periods, not on the value of the investment for life. With retirement funds in South Africa, they must be paid out inside South Africa, whereas offshore regular savings can be paid out globally. The other big pertinent difference is with government-backed investor protection, in South Africa, you only have $5,000, so about 100,000 Rand. Internationally, well, if the company you put your investments with goes bust, at least 90% of your money is safe. And one could argue, it's never going to go bust. What could go wrong? There are companies, 2008 has proven that the too big to fail is certainly not a thing anymore. Companies can fail. Let me see, how's that poll doing? The poll's doing very well. Please continue with the poll if you don't mind finishing that. Now, for those of you who want to ask, what about, if you're saving less than 1,500 or less than 350,000 RMB, the same principles apply. Decide. Are you going to do it in rands or are you going to do it in dollars, pounds, or euros? Are you going to do it somewhere where you pay tax or are you going to do it somewhere where you don't pay tax? The values are lower, but the principles are still very much the same. Right, thank you so much, everyone, for your time. Before I go, we'll do the Q&A now. I just want to let everyone know about in April, on the 16th, I will be doing a webinar on the future of the dollar, asking that question, is the dollar dead? And I'm sure it's something that's been on many people's lips. We'll be joined by a panel of experts from around the globe. So I will advertise it, but look out for that. It's going to be a big one. I've been asked so much about this, and almost every second person out there that I do reviews with on a regular basis keeps asking me, well, is the dollar dead? What about BRICS? We'll dive into all of that in that webinar, not just with me, but as you can see from some industry experts from across the globe. Right, there are just a few more people who need to do that poll, please. It does help me a lot if you do the poll. Then we will, I'm going to stop sharing my screen now so we can go to the questions and do the Q&A. Stop share. There we go. Right. Let me load. If you have questions, I see there's a few questions that some people have sent. You can type it into the Q&A box. There is a Q&A box for everyone where you can do that. Let's see, the poll's still doing well. Where is the poll? I see someone's asked, where is the poll? It should be on your screen. I never know really what it looks like on the other end, on the client end of these presentations, but it should be there. Maybe towards the bottom of the screen, somewhere there should be a little block saying poll or something. Okay, right, another question. Okay, so this one, I'm going to answer these questions as I go. So I can answer live. Um, do I need to, okay, this is a tax one. Do I need to declare my savings abroad, so my foreign savings, to SARS or my host country's tax authority? Yes, you do. You do need to tell your SARS about your money that you earn abroad, and you need to tell SARS about the savings that you have abroad. You do also need to tell your own host countries. If you're in China, you need to tell China about that. If you're in Korea, you need to tell Korea about that as well. And a very interesting nuance that many people don't understand is that tax-free savings is tax-free savings inside South Africa. And while you're only starting and it's small, it's not a problem. But once that money starts to grow significantly and starts to earn a decent income or decent growth, it's not tax, your tax-free savings in South Africa, which you need to tell the Chinese authorities or need to tell the Korean authorities about, isn't tax-free in those countries. So it's, you can actually be taxed on your tax-free savings abroad, if that makes sense to you. So you want to be able to make sure that when you do set up tax-free savings, that it's not in a tax-free savings account, that it's actually in something that, what they call gross roll-up and it's outside of the tax net, something that's capital in nature. Another question I see. Um, should I keep some savings in South Africa to maintain ties, financial ties, and credit history? That honestly is a personal thing. There's two sides of the coin to that, or two sides of the knife. If you maintain financial ties and you keep your savings inside South Africa, you can't exactly go and argue to SARS that you don't plan on coming back to South Africa and shouldn't be tax resident inside South Africa. Because then, well, why are you keeping your savings inside South Africa unless you plan to come back here? So if you do plan on coming back in the near future or sometime, it makes sense to keep credit record going, makes sense to keep financial ties going. But if you plan on spending, if you plan on not coming back or staying for as long as you can or staying indefinitely, then it makes sense to rather just keep your things abroad, not inside South Africa. And by saying that, I'm not saying that, for example, if you're in China, to keep your things in China. Because you do, and I've had quite a few clients in that sort of instance where they've built up significant amounts of wealth in China and now they're ready to come back, but they can't bring their money because it's more than they're allowed and because they don't have all the documentary evidences and proofs anymore to be able to bring that money. So very often it is easier to rather just keep your savings somewhere else where you know you won't have those issues. With an international investment account, do I have access to high yield savings or ETFs? Yes. So if you set up an international investment abroad or regular saver, you will have access to different types of ETFs and different types of high yielding types of accounts. Is the rand likely to depreciate further against the dollar? Okay, so yes, so last year the rand actually rose against the dollar, but yes, I'm assuming this is from that 20-year the ZAR slide that I showed earlier. Yes, the rand is likely. Look, it is a depreciating currency. It has a lot to do. It's not just whether there is a war on the go at the moment, or whether Trump is imposing tariffs or not. The rand losing value has much more to do with the economics within inside South Africa. And there, geopolitical stability plays a big role. The GDP plays a big role. Unemployment, power security, water security, unemployment, all of those things play very big roles. It's not just one or two things. And I don't see us fixing those sorts of things anytime soon. And then last question, will I be taxed twice? Okay, I assume this is from the previous question. So no, you won't be taxed twice. So if you save money abroad, yes, you have to tell South Africa about that savings, and you have to tell your own local country where you're living about that savings. But you won't be taxed in both countries. Most countries have double tax agreements, and if you're saving in a tax-free jurisdiction and it's set up correctly, you won't pay tax. But if it's not set up correctly, You won't pay, again, you won't pay tax in both countries, but you could very well end up paying tax on tax-free savings in the other country. Right, I hope that was of value. I hope everyone found that useful. If you have any questions, you are more than welcome to reach out to me. I am always available. I am the group expert on many of your groups in actual fact. So please do look out for me on your big expat groups. I will share quickly my contact details for those who have not seen it. So you can then reach out to me either over WhatsApp or over Kakao Talk or WeChat or via Messenger. I'm available on many of those different platforms. Let me just share that for those who want to be able to see. Share. There we go. Let's see if I can get to the last page. Please do reach out. I'm always available for questions. I have no problem, even if you just want a brief sort of chat or some guidance. There we go. So WeChat, Matthew Turan, Kakao Talk, also Matthew Turan. There's my WhatsApp number. You can email me at matthew.turan@holbornassets.com, or you can search me on Facebook, Matthew.Turan 1975. That's giving away my age. You can see I'm that old that I have, a year in my Facebook ID. Or reach out to me either on the South Africans in South Korea group, South Africans in China, South Africans moving to and living in China, or the South Africans living in China groups. Thank you so much for attending. I hope that I will hear from some of you. And if not, I hope to see you in that webinar in April on the future of the dollar. Is the dollar dead? Thank you.